You know, in the high-stakes world of military justice, there are some lines you're just never supposed to cross. But what happens when the very code that you live and die by is the thing that pushes you right over that line? Today, we are diving deep into a story where duty, honor, and the law collide in a truly explosive courtroom drama.
So, the whole thing kicks off with a shocking event at one of the most secure military bases in the entire world. Two enlisted men, guys who were part of this elite corps, are suddenly charged with the murder of one of their own.
And boom, right out of the gate, you get hit with this central, timeless dilemma that's going to drive every single moment of this story. It's a defense that asks some really tough questions about where military obedience ends and where your own personal morality has to begin.
Okay, so before we can even get to the legal fireworks, we've got to understand the incident that set this whole thing in motion. What exactly happened to Private Santiago down at Guantanamo?
All right, so here are the raw facts of the case. The victim is Private First Class William Santiago, a Marine who by all accounts was really struggling to keep up. The accused, Lance Corporal Harold Dawson and Private Loudon Downey. Now, they don't deny what they did. They tied him up, they stuffed a rag in his mouth, but the million-dollar question is why? The prosecution says it was malicious, it was murder, but the defense, they're arguing it was a disciplinary action, a code red that went tragically, horribly wrong.
So, with the case laid out, the story pivots to the legal team that gets assigned to defend these two Marines. And let's just say they do not start out as a happy family. Not at all. On one hand, you've got Lieutenant Daniel Coffey. This guy is a brilliant lawyer for sure, but he's also kind of lazy and has built his entire career on one thing, avoiding courtrooms and getting quick plea bargains. On the other hand, you have Lieutenant Commander Joanne Galloway. She is all in, a true believer in justice, and she smells a cover-up from a mile away. Right from the jump, their completely different approaches create some serious tension. And this quote, it just perfectly sums up Coffey's whole attitude at the beginning. I mean, Galloway is trying to talk about the literal lives of two Marines hanging in the balance, and this is his response. It just shows you how disconnected he is, and how far he really has to go. So, as the lawyers start digging, they stumble onto this kind of shadowy, unofficial practice that ends up being the absolute heart of their entire argument. It's something the military officially denies exists, but it seems like everybody on the inside knows it's real.
They call it a code red. So what is that exactly? Well, think of it as off-the-books discipline. It's when Marines take it upon themselves to, well, violently train another member of their unit who they think is falling behind or being a weak link. It is a brutal, unofficial system of enforcement that exists completely outside the rulebook.
And from the perspective of Dawson and Downey, this is the whole justification. They argue they were given a direct order to carry out this code red. For them, it wasn't about being cruel. It was about upholding the code they live by. Unit, corps, God, country. Personal judgment? It didn't even enter the equation. The order was everything.
And an order like that has to come from somewhere, right? Which leads us all the way to the top of the food chain at Guantanamo Bay. This is Colonel Nathan Jessup. He is the base commander, and he is a man who embodies absolute, unquestionable military authority. To him, weakness isn't something you fix. It's a disease you cut out.
And this, right here, is where everything comes to a head. Coffey, who is now fully invested and transformed, he realizes that the only way to save his clients is to prove that this illegal order came from the most powerful man on that base. This is a massive risk. I mean, think about it. You're going to put a decorated, powerful colonel on the witness stand and basically accuse him of ordering a crime. It is a huge gamble, but it's the only play they have left. So Jessup gets up there, and he's just so arrogant, so dismissive. He's practically lecturing Coffey on how the real world works. For him, the chain of command isn't just a good idea, it is the only thing standing between order and chaos, between life and death.
But Coffey doesn't back down. He just keeps pushing, keeps poking, finding these little cracks in Jessup's testimony. He questions why Santiago, a Marine supposedly in danger, wasn't simply transferred off the base. And you can just feel the pressure building, and you can see that ironclad control of the colonel start to slip.
And then it happens. The moment the entire trial has been building towards, Coffey pushes one button too many, and Jessup just explodes. It's this iconic, unforgettable line. And in that moment, he's not just yelling at Coffey, he's yelling at the entire civilian world that he believes is too weak and too soft to understand what it takes to keep them safe. And this is the core of it, right?
This is his whole worldview laid bare. Jessup genuinely believes he operates on a higher moral plane, where his actions, no matter how brutal, are necessary for the greater good. In his mind, he's the guardian on the wall, and he has nothing but contempt for anyone who dares to question his methods. And in that incredible burst of pride and anger, he admits it. He ordered the code red. So, after that bombshell confession, the trial is basically over. But the verdict? Well, it's not nearly as simple as you might think. The outcome is actually pretty nuanced, and it speaks to the much deeper questions at the heart of the story.
So here's how it all shakes out. On the big charges, murder and conspiracy, the jury acquits Dawson and Downey. They agree that the two Marines were just following an order. But they are found guilty of conduct unbecoming a Marine. And the sentence for that? A dishonorable discharge. So they walk out of the courtroom legally free, but their entire identity as Marines is stripped away from them, forever.
And it's in that moment, after the verdict, that Dawson has this incredible, profound moment of clarity. He finally gets it. Their true failure wasn't in disobeying an order, but in following one that led them to betray their most basic duty, to protect the weak, not prey on them.
And that's when Coffey drops the final and maybe the most important lesson of the whole story. He tells them that true honor, it doesn't come from a uniform or a title. It comes from your own personal integrity. It's about doing the right thing, especially when it's the hardest thing to do.
So what's the big picture here? What does this all mean? Well, this story leaves us right on that razor's edge between following orders and following your conscience. It forces us all to ask what honor really means. Is it blind obedience or something more? And maybe most importantly, it hammers home the idea that nobody, no matter their rank, is above being held accountable for their actions. And it really leaves you with this one final question to chew on. In their mission to uphold the code of unit, corps, God, country, did Dawson and Downey actually fail that code by hurting one of their own? Or did they fail themselves by not listening to their own gut, their own moral compass? It's a conflict that is just as relevant today as it ever was.